Wilson in the building, thank you for the gifted 5 memberships. Really appreciate it. And then we have a couple chats coming in here through Streamlabs. Let me get those pulled up. If you guys want to get a message in, it's $99 and up. We have Intel Wild. Oh, it's coming in as a TTS.
Intel Wild donated $100.
I'm going to fix my Streamlabs as well, by the way.
Not so bright. Do you like BDSM because you were getting spanked by Jay?
Do you like BDSM when you get spanked by Jay?
Classic. When you can't defeat a woman, you just have to sexually
Like when you
degrade
do
her
the
and
dongs
make
in your mouth, like that? Is that a good example we're talking about?
When I'm
So I can't defeat a woman, so you put dongs in your mouth?
No, I
Because it's
said
funny?
you can't defeat a woman without sexually degrading her and then making a joke.
Like when you put dongs in your mouth. Is that sexually degrading?
Myself.
Like yourself, right? So it's all subjective, like relativism.
Usually you can make jokes about yourself that
Do you believe in relativism?
It's subjective like relativism. No. You can be... I'll explain this later. You can be a relativist without being a subjectivist.
Too?
Yeah, I do.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Is it self-refuting?
No.
Is relativism true?
I think relativism is case by case. Like for example, like a good way to understand relativism is with canon law. So canon law is relative to each case. So sometimes we apply certain canons in different ways. That would be an example of relativism, okay? Relativism is just saying that rules apply in different ways to different people at different times. That's relativism. What it doesn't talk about is the ontology of those moral facts. It does not talk about them at all. So like relativism will talk about how the canons are applied. Relativism does not talk about whether the canons themselves exist or not. You see what I mean?
But depends on what you mean by true.
Is everything relative?
Yes, but that doesn't mean it's like subjective.
It means the same thing. Yeah.
No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
No, it
Something
does
being
not.
totally relative means that it is subjective.
No, not necessarily. Canons are, thusly speaking, relative. Jay would debate you on that topic. Is relatively subjective? No, actually. So in philosophy, relativism is usually opposed to 4 main things or schools of thought. Relativism is usually opposed to objectivism, universalism, otherwise known as what's the name? It's the objectivism, universalism. The term for universalism, absolutism. There you go. So relativism, absolutism, and then you have 2 other things: monism and realism. Okay. When you are a relativist, you are usually opposed to all, okay? Usually when you meet a relativist, they would be non-committal or anti these 4 things. However, relativism itself doesn't mean that you have to explain why. Even though it sounds contradictory, I'll explain why. Imagine the idea murder is wrong, right? The phrase murder is wrong. Now, the phrase murder is wrong has its existence in reality. So the moral fact that murder is wrong exists in reality. But the application of that particular ideal may not apply to every single person. So the fact that this moral fact exists is different from whether or not everyone has to believe in it. The same way that the moral fact of, let's say, like in the Old Testament, when you say the fact that in the time of Israel, like the covenants of circumcision was correct, okay? That under the system would be objective, right? Meaning that there is a existence or an ontology to this moral fact of getting circumcised or spiritual fact of getting circumcised. But that particular existence of circumcision did not apply to everyone. So the sacramental existence, although is objective, is relative because it doesn't apply to people that are non-Jewish. Does that make sense, chat? So you have this thing that exists that is objective but is relative, meaning that it doesn't apply to everyone. So think about the distinction between its existence and then its application. So you have the existence of a thing, the application of a thing. Okay? Then you have, I study theology at uni. Then you have a moral monism. Moral monism says that there is only one right answer or one right way of applying things, which again sort of maps onto universalism. And again, you can see why if you're a universalist, you're usually an objectivist and you're usually a monist and you're usually a realist because they all link to each other, but they're not exactly the same in meaning and philosophy. I had this view as well until I came to uni and I realized that I was wrong, right? So if you are a relativist, you are someone that opposes absolutism. You are saying that the rule that exists does not apply to everyone in every case. Now, it seems kind of inconsistent, sure, because if it does exist, then it should exist no matter what, and it should be applied to everyone no matter what. And so you can see the link between those two, but technically, they're not definitionally the same thing. It's not trivial to say that you're an objectivist, which means that you're an absolutist. It's not the same thing, or a universalist. Universalism says everyone must believe X, right? This applies to everyone. Like, the fact that grape is wrong isn't relative. Grape is absolute. So it is something that applies to everyone. But even if you believe that it applies to everyone, you wouldn't have to say that exists in reality. All you're saying is I believe that this should be applied to everyone, but you're not making a judgment or a statement as to whether this moral truth exists mind independently from you. All the person is asking you is whether or not you believe this should be applied to everyone. So that's the difference between relativism, objectivism, absolutism, subjectivism, monism, non-monism or dualism, and realism and anti-realism when it comes to moral facts, truth, and statements. And I'll go into that a bit more as well. Does that help, chat? Put one in the chat if that helps, put two in the chat if that doesn't. Like, bro, this is something that I had to learn in my philosophical theology course as well. Like, I had to learn that. 3. But yeah, usually in common parlance, when people refer to something being objective or subjective or relative or absolute, they mean the same thing in common parlance, okay? But in phil, they do not mean the same thing. And in academic discussions, they don't mean the same thing. So I know some of you guys might be shocked, but you can actually check the Stanford Encyclopedia as well, and you can see whether or not this is correct. Matter of fact, I'll pull this up now. Let me see. Relativism. Relativism. Here it is. Okay. So here you guys go, right? This is moral relativism, as you can see. Okay. Let me go. Yeah. So this is the contrast of relativism. So notice that they're not necessarily the same thing. Sure, but isn't that the etymological fallacy? No. This isn't an etymological fallacy because you're not looking at the etymology of the word. You're just actually looking about how the word is defined today. And we know that this is how the word is defined today because this actual entry was written in 2025 by Maria Bagramian, right? Bagramian. So this actual text was written by Bagramian and Carter. It's in 2025. It's not an etymological thing. This is something that has been affirmed for a very long time in philosophy. At least in the past 40 to 50 years, of which J would have already existed. So this is the idea of relativism, okay? You see the 4 points that I pointed out to you before, right? You have these 4 points that you have in philosophy, okay? I'm just going to make myself smaller and move myself over, okay? So as you can see, okay, you have absolutism, or the view that at least some truths or values remain in the relevant domain always exist, okay? Oof, okay. Where is it? Let's go for relativism, way relativism, avoiding others, no neutral ground, context dependence. Where is it? My days. You can read this whole thing. Oh, I'm just gonna, hold on. I skipped it. Oh. Yeah, here it is. So we have absolutism. So relativism is opposed to absolutism, but we traditionally contrast relativism with objectivism as well. So the contrast or opposite of relativism, okay, to be very clear, the opposite or contrast of relativism is objectivism. Yes. The opposite of something being relative is actually it being objective, although they don't actually mean the same thing. If you are a relativist, you are actually in complete opposite to absolutism. Absolutism is the view that at least some truths in the relevant domain apply to all times, places, or social and cultural frameworks. They are universal and they're not bound by historical or social conditions. Okay, this is the key contrasting idea. Now, although objectivism, okay, although objectivism is the opposite of relativism, the key or absolute opposite of relativism is absolutism. Absolutism is the idea that moral truths and moral statements normatively apply to everyone at all times in all cases. What it does not tell you is about the existence of these moral truths. It doesn't tell you whether these moral truths exist outside of your mind. It doesn't tell you about whether these moral truths exist mind dependently. It doesn't make a commitment to that yet. Although most people that are absolutists believe in absolutism because they are objectivists as well. So they believe that they're actually that the truths in themselves, the truth of a matter, is mind independent. Okay. That is what objectivism is. By the way, I'm reading chat. We just had someone, Vincent DeVaches, sent in a 70 Australian dollars. The problem is that the left bends reality. They adopt an ideology that's basis is subjective truth. Gender doesn't exist. You accept these anchors of the debate, they will lose because you can't have a rational argument if your views rely on objective truth. What? I don't know what you're trying to say. I apologize. What do you mean by theology? Do they teach about the theology of the main denominations? I learn patristics mainly. But I mean, how is it used in common parlance versus how it's actually defined? Yeah. It's not an etymological fallacy. It's just you being a debate bro asshole. But like, given the fact that Jay's put himself in the position as to like know all these kind of things, then yeah, he should know them. So absolutism is that. Objectivism is that. Now, monism is an interesting one, right? Monism means that in any sort of disagreement that you have, there's only one right answer. So you can notice that relativism is opposed to monism because in relativism, you could have, in some sense, some different right answers, okay? You can have some answers that are right in some cases, some answers that are right in different cases, right? So that's what monism is. Usually in any moral dispute, there is only one right answer. Whereas in relativism, they are pluralists about the right answers. They are pluralists for truth, right? They have equally valid or equal truths. You know, this is your truth, this is your truth, this is my truth, right? Oh, Vincent is saying gender theory is useless to someone. Oh, okay. Yeah, it can be useless, yeah. It's useless to study since its whole basis is wrong. Okay, I understand. But that means that studying heresy is wrong because the basis of heresy is wrong. And then you have the last one, which is realism, which obviously means that there is an objective and singularity of truth, meaning that truth itself actually exists in reality. Objectivism means that the moral statements themselves exist. Absolutism means that the moral statements apply to everyone. Monism means that there's only one right decision every single turning point. And realism just means that truth itself as a property exists. So put a 1 in the chat if that helps, put a 2 in the chat if that doesn't.